complex. You can see his apartment from this corner of the building. Would you like to get out here?
Yeah, let's do that.
We're standing outside the gated courtyard of the two-story complex where Elliot lived with two roommates, Weihan Wang and Cheng Hong.
So that's where the suspect murdered his two roommates and then a third victim who was a friend of the roommates.
Elliot had complained about their loud video games and even called the police 4 months before the attack, saying one of them stole candles from him. He used a knife to kill Wang and then Hong as he returned from class. Then he killed George Chen, a friend of theirs who'd come over around dinner time, stabbing each victim more times than the last.
The suspect was escalating his level of violence with each victim, almost like he was becoming more confident and more empowered to just inflict more damage.
Elliot had planned it out carefully. Investigators found evidence suggesting he had rehearsed by stabbing pillows and slashing at the sheets on his bed. Back in the SUV, we head a few blocks over to the commercial center of town, where Elliot went at 7:30 that evening.
With all the bodies still in the apartment, he takes a shower, changes clothes, and drives to the Starbucks, gets a triple vanilla latte.
At the Starbucks, he starts texting with his mom. Chin had asked him earlier in the day to call when he was finished with his classes. Now he messages her back and says he'll call her tomorrow when he's in his car. She replies, "Why not today?" He tells her he feels like relaxing, that he's just finished with his semester. "Congrats," she says. He tells her thanks.
That was the only video surveillance we had of him. We got him purchasing the coffee, and he's very calm when he makes the purchase, calmly walks out, and he goes back to his apartment.
In the aftermath, news reports labeled him psychotic, but experts found he was not. Planning and carrying out a mass shooting requires organized thinking, preparation. This was a long-developed plan, and it was just starting. The sheriff's report shows that just after 9 p.m., Elliot uploads his final video to YouTube. He also sends out an email to nearly 36 people, including his parents, counselors, and the apartment manager. It contains a screed detailing what he calls his life story, 137 pages about his despair, his rage against women, and his plans to kill. Then he drives a few blocks in his black BMW and parks. He'd been surveilling the sorority house.
So the suspect arrives. He's got a handgun, multiple rounds of ammunition strapped to his waist, and a fanny pack, and he also has a gallon of gas. What he didn't anticipate was the fact that the door is going to be locked.
He tries the handle, then starts banging on the door. No one answers. He leaves the gas can at the door and goes back to his car, where he spots 3 young women on the street: Bianca DeCoke, Catherine Cooper, and Veronica Weiss.
The suspect pulls up alongside of them. He fires multiple rounds at all three. All 3 are hit.
And we have 3 down. Okay, I need 3 ambulances here.
The bullets severely injure Bianca and kill her 2 friends, Catherine and Veronica. Elliot didn't know them. He wanted to kill any women he could.
Shots fired, shots fired.
Next, Elliot drives a few blocks to a deli mart and fires at people who flee inside, killing student Christopher Martinez.
Okay, we got another gunshot.
He speeds off toward his next target, Del Playa Drive, ramming people with his car and firing more shots along the way. About 8 minutes into the spree, as police close in, he does what many mass shooters do before they can be caught. Witnesses hear one last shot. The BMW swerves and smashes into a parked car.
When they find the suspect, he's got a clear gunshot wound in his head, and then that's where it all ends.
Thousands of UC Santa Barbara students and members of the community remembering the 6 friends and fellow students killed in a violent rampage that left many others injured.
She was my best friend and like a sister to me. Not my sister. And I miss her dearly. She's always going to be in our hearts.
When will this insanity stop? When will enough people say, stop this madness? We don't have to live like this. Too many have died. We should say to ourselves, not one more.
The majority of mass shooters are people who have decided to end their own lives by taking others with them, whether they justify that with hatred of women or other kinds of extremist thought. In the aftermath, the media quickly republished Elliot's screed, calling it his manifesto. He was depicted online as the leader of a violent incel revolution, a misleading narrative that continues today. Elliot did post comments on fringe incel websites, but a lot of his writing and comments suggest he did not identify as an incel or see himself as their leader. Yet to this day, copycat attackers praise him, and media coverage keeps the cycle going.
Do you think that it's accurate to say that incel ideology is what caused Elliot Rodger to do what he did?
No, I don't think incel ideology in and of itself caused him to do what he did. I think maybe that helped him justify the violence or helped him identify the victims.
Dr. Lee points to how being in a party town like Isla Vista amplified his suicidal thinking.
If his grievance is he can't connect with people and he's constantly isolated, he's living in that environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
He was surrounded by what he wanted, but believed he could never have.
In upwards of 95% of the cases we've worked, the persons are not well connected socially, and they're often alone, and they often have thoughts of killing themselves.
That's what this problem is. The majority of mass shootings are driven by suicide, no matter what ideology they're wrapped in.
I do not think my son wanted to be famous. He did not want to be a leader of any group. In the end, he was driven by his perceived long suffering, and I think at that late stage, his perception of others, even his family, disappeared. What was left with himself, with his own hopelessness, rage, and revenge.
When we come back,
The Elliot Rodger case was the impetus for gun violence restraining orders in this state.
how what happened in Isla Vista has changed violence prevention in California and across the country. You're listening to Reveal.
Your right to know what's really going on in our world depends on more than just great journalism. It depends on your participation.
Houston Public Media is funded by Houstonians for Houstonians. 80% of our budget comes directly from you, our community.
That's how trusted information stays free and accessible. No ads, no shareholders, just clear and careful reporting.
Protect your right to stay informed by visiting HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Hello, I'm Ernie Manous. I'm the next Hello Houston. Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez will be live in studio to chat and take your questions.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. We'll also talk immigration and the rise of deportations here in Houston with attorney Ross Miller.
And I'm Celestia Sherman, and as always, we give you the biggest stories of the day at the top of each hour and get your thoughts. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
It's Hello Houston, where Houston talks, 11 a.m. to 1, right here on News 88.7.
From the Center for Investigative Reporting and PRX, this is Reveal. I'm Al Letson. Inside the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Training Facility, framed photos and plaques line the front hallway. One photo shows a black BMW wrecked on a street dotted with palm trees. Two officers are looking over it. The driver's door is open, an airbag ballooning out of the side. The photo is a reminder of an event that shook this community. Lieutenant Joe Schmidt was the lead homicide detective on the case.
Sometimes there are certain cases we investigate that maybe touch our soul a little bit more, and this was definitely one of them.
In the years since the violent rampage more than a decade ago, the Sheriff's Office has built a program to try and stop the next tragedy before it happens. That's what brings Mother Jones journalist Mark Follman here today to learn more about how the case led to change.
What would you say were the key lessons learned from the Elliot Rodger case in terms of violence prevention and threat assessment?
The quicker the intervention, the higher likelihood of lives being saved. I would rather spend the time investigating these things that end up being nothing than not doing it and then having that one slip away.
Before the rampage, sheriff's deputies went to Elliot Rodger's apartment for the welfare check. but they didn't run a records check for guns or go inside.
Let's say there's a similar situation today. How would that be handled now?
I'll have dispatch check them and see if they have weapons issued to them. Matter of fact, when I promoted to sergeant in 2016, my first day here was a check the welfare, almost identical circumstances. And I thought, well, I know how these have gone down in the past, but because of what I know from 2014, and I even asked him consent to search his apartment, which I did, and found nothing.
It wasn't just law enforcement rethinking how these situations could have been handled differently. In the aftermath, the intense media coverage lasted for weeks. Grieving father Richard Martinez joined other advocates in pressuring California lawmakers to tighten gun laws.
Chris Martinez's father, so Chris was a victim of the shooting at the Isla Vista Deli. His father was very active in getting this additional tool approved, and he lobbied in Sacramento to get it done.
4 months later, in September 2014, California passed a law designed to keep guns away from people who might be at risk of violence. It created what's called a gun violence restraining order, also known as a red flag law. A judge decides if a person is too dangerous to have firearms based on evidence of erratic behavior, threats, concerns about suicide.
The gun violence restraining order, that's an ability for law enforcement or family to, if they have a concern about somebody being a potential threat, it's created a mechanism or a tool for law enforcement to seize weapons.
California's red flag law was one of the first in the country. The policy began to spread nationally, especially after the Parkland High School massacre in 2018. Today, there are red flag laws in 22 states and Washington, D.C. The policy has strong bipartisan voter support, though it still faces fierce opposition from conservative politicians. Research shows these laws are effective for preventing suicide and mass shootings. A study of more than 200 red flag cases in California shows that the law works. None of the people who lost access to guns went on to commit a shooting. The law has been essential to Dr. Sherilyn Lee's team at the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office.
This has been a key tool in a lot of, if not most of the threat assessments and threat management cases that we've worked in. There was an individual a couple years ago, and he sent a text telling all of his friends that he was suicidal.
Someone contacted Dr. Lee's team to alert them, and they moved quickly to step in.
He had 16 guns, 2 of which were buried in the backyard. He was sewing armored plating into the driver's side and passenger side of his vehicle. So this is somebody that wanted to do some damage. And so law enforcement had the ability to intervene before he could commit his carnage. And this is when we found all the guns and so on and so forth. They were all legally owned. We decided to place the individual on a psychiatric hold because clearly he wasn't well and needed some help.
The red flag law allowed the threat team to temporarily take away the guns. Dr. Lee tells me about another case she's currently handling that involves a middle schooler who had told a teacher he was feeling suicidal. Without revealing his identity, she shows me some photos from the case file.
Oh, is this the 12-year-old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are the images that I spoke about.
Yeah.
So the most fascinating thing to me from a psychologist perspective.
We're looking at papers from his school folder. There are drawings of a person pointing a gun, dead bodies, and blood. He'd written in big, bold letters, "Murder is on my mind." These papers are mixed in with homework and a class schedule.
PE, bio English, Spanish school shooting, and then worksheets. That's ambivalence. In my mind, he's not fully committed. We have opportunity there.
Threat assessment teams don't just look for warning signs. They also look for what they call positive inhibitors, things in someone's life that can be used to support them.
Yes, he's planning a school shooting, but he's also planning on turning in his homework.
2 months later, Dr. Lee tells me the student is doing better. But across the nation, younger and younger kids are making threats and even committing attacks. A 6-year-old child shot his first-grade teacher in Virginia in 2023. This disturbing trend underscores why early intervention is so important. I've looked at many cases where teams figured out what was driving people into crisis and connected with them successfully, in schools, in workplaces, and elsewhere. one can undo all the suffering from the 2014 attack in Isla Vista, not for the victims or their families, and not for the killer's mother. Like all suicidal mass shooters, Elliot Rodger lacked hope. The importance of having hope echoes in how his mother, Chin, is finding her path forward.
Question in terms of what Chin Rodger has done to do you think it has benefit to the public in terms of raising more awareness about these kinds of behaviors, or how parents or friends should react to someone that's concerning them?
I think it does have value, because I mean her story is a terrible one to have to tell, but she can make people think.
Dr. Stephen White is the psychologist you heard from earlier. He's the foremost expert on the Elliot Rodger case. Chin's experience is beneficial to him and other prevention experts because of the level of detail that she has shared about her son's slide into despair and violence.
I have a lot of respect for her and parents like her who want to do something to contribute. What can I do so it doesn't happen or happens less often? And that's admirable. That's meaningful.
In 2022, Chin was invited to give a keynote speech to more than 1,000 people at a national threat assessment conference in California.
And it was a very powerful talk and very respectfully received. It was hard for her, but she has done something with this to get some good out of this terrible event.
In the audience were psychologists, counselors, police, FBI agents, and other practitioners. It was the first time she would stand on a stage and tell her story. It wouldn't be the last.
It doesn't get any easier. Thank you for your gracious invitation.
Since then, she's continued to speak at threat assessment trainings around the country.
So that when you're out there talking to parents, when you're out there talking to a young man on this same pathway, you have more insights on your mission to stop targeted violence. I believe that if a robust threat assessment program or team were in place, then the outcome would have been very different. If I and all the
More training conferences are ahead on Chin's calendar, and she says the reception she's gotten at her talks has helped her heal. In the past, when she would meet someone and they asked if she had kids, she wouldn't even say she had a son. But now, when someone asks her, she finds herself answering differently. She says she has a son, and that she lost him in a tragedy.
I think one of the most important thing I want to get through is that if you are an individual with emotional, social issues contemplating suicide, or this pathway, if you're a parent or individual around this person, call someone, tell someone, do not be alone in it. And also say, I wish that the nightmare that I'm living, that the victims and the families are living, these nightmares are real, and these nightmares could be your reality any day. So we must work harder in coming together and try and prevent these horrific acts from happening again and again.
Decades of threat assessment research point to a fundamental truth. People who end up doing what Elliot Rodger did feel profoundly alone. And part of them doesn't want to do it. They need help. And with the growth of this field nationally, more of them may now get that help before it's too late.
That story was reported by Mark Foman, National Affairs Editor at Mother Jones Magazine. He's also the author of the book Trigger Points, Inside the Mission to Stop Mass Shootings in America. There's so much more to this investigation that you can find in Mark's cover story on motherjones.com. If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide, help is available. Call or text 988 to reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Our lead producer for this week's show is Michael I. Schiller. Jenny Casas edited the show. Special thanks to James West for additional field production and to Mother Jones editor Jeremy Shulman. This week's episode was fact-checked by Maggie Duffy with support from Reveal's Nikki Frick. Victoria Baranetsky is our general counsel. Our production managers are Stephen Rascone and Zulema Cobb. Score and sound design by the dynamic duo, Jay Breezy, Mr. Jim Briggs, and Fernando, my man, Yo Aruda. Our interim executive producers are Brett Myers and Taki Telenidis. Our theme music is by Camarado, Lightning. Support for Reveal is provided by the Reva and David Logan Foundation, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Park Foundation, the Schmidt Family Foundation, and the Hellman Foundation. Support for Reveal is also provided by you, our listeners. We are a co-production of the Center for Investigative Reporting and PRX. I'm Al Letson, and remember, there is always more to the story.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on TV 8.6. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World helps us understand the movements, conflicts, and cultures that connect us all. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at HoustonPublicMedia.org.
Support comes from Carr, Riggs & Ingram, CPAs and Advisors, a top 25 nationally ranked full-service accounting and advisory firm offering tax, audit, accounting, consulting, and advisory services. Learn more at CRICPA.com.
Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
Welcome to NewsHour from the World Service of the BBC. This is Owen Bennett-Jones, and on the programme today, the latest Israeli assault on Gaza.
Lots of airstrikes, shellings, drones, shooting, even explosion by robo-tank in northern Gaza and the eastern parts of Gaza.
And at the same time, Hamas says it is in indirect talks with Israel about a ceasefire. We'll hear about the incredible journey of Voyager 1 48 years on with its freshly repaired thrusters.
Our sun is moving through space and the Voyagers are out in front of it. And so they're actually sampling space that we have yet to pass through.
Milking spider venom in Australia, don't miss that, and the latest from the Eurovision Song Contest in Switzerland. It's all coming up after the news.
Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. President Trump says he will have a phone call with the Russian leader Vladimir Putin on Monday. Mr. Trump has been seeking to end the conflict, but has only had limited success. Our correspondent Joe Inwood has the details.
Donald Trump is going to speak to President Putin. We understand that his main topic of conversation is, in his words, stopping the bloodbath, in quotations. We're then going to have a call, we understand, after that, or he will have a call with President Zelensky of Ukraine and other NATO members. And I think the idea is that Donald Trump is trying to put into action what he said last week, which is that the war in Ukraine is only really going to stop when him and Vladimir Putin get round a table. Now, of course, this isn't a table, it's a phone line, but I think the White House will be hoping that this is a first step towards trying to do something to end the invasion.
Israel and Hamas have begun a new round of indirect talks as the IDF has redoubled its offensive in Gaza. A senior Hamas official has said the talks are taking place without preconditions and with all issues on the table. There's considerable pressure on both sides to agree to a US-backed plan, as Wera Davis in Jerusalem explains.
If they agree on a ceasefire in Gaza, that would mean that some of the remaining hostages would be released in exchange for a period of calm, a period of relative peace. The problem is that if the ceasefire isn't agreed upon, Israel has vowed to go back into Gaza with thousands of soldiers under a new plan to defeat Hamas once and for all. And the impact of that on Gaza's 2.1 million people could be devastating, because there's already a huge humanitarian crisis
More than 20 people are now known to have been killed when a powerful weather system caused storms and tornadoes across central United States on Friday. At least 14 people died in Kentucky and 7 in neighboring Missouri. The storms have caused widespread destruction. In St. Louis alone, at least 5,000 buildings were damaged. Its mayor, Cara Spencer, described the storm as one of the worst to have hit the city.
We know that the devastation is truly tremendous. We are estimating right now about 5,000 buildings have been impacted, and we do have our building department, our inspectors are out there making sure that we are first and foremost assessing the damage, to be condemning buildings and moving through demolition and other security as we go through this.
An overnight curfew has been extended. A second man has been arrested in connection with fires at 2 properties linked to the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. London police said counter-terrorism officers detained the 26-year-old man at Luton Airport on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent to endanger life. On Thursday, a Ukrainian man was charged over the same fires. One of the properties targeted was the family home Sir Keir lived in before moving to Downing Street. No one was hurt in the incidents. This is the latest world news from the BBC. Police in Finland say several people have been killed after 2 helicopters collided in mid-air and crashed to the ground. Media reports say the aircraft had taken off from Estonia and were carrying businessmen. An eyewitness told a Finnish newspaper that one helicopter hit the other during a manoeuvre just west of Helsinki. Police say they can't yet confirm the number or identities of the fatalities. Guyana's parliament has passed legislation that holds oil companies liable for the damage caused by spills during offshore production. Penalties would be up to $2 billion. Guyana has recently begun exploring huge offshore oil and gas fields discovered 10 years ago. The government says it's vital to protect the country's environment, including its mangroves, from the effects of oil spills. An alleged leader of Brazil's biggest criminal organisation has been arrested in neighbouring Bolivia. Marcos Roberto de Almeida, known as Tuta, is believed to be number 2 in the PCC, or First Command of the Capital, which smuggles huge amounts of cocaine into Europe. Brazil has requested his extradition. Crystal Palace have made history by winning their first major trophy, the world's oldest football tournament, the FA Cup. They beat 7 times winners Manchester City 1-0 at a packed Wembley Stadium. Eberechi Eze scored the only goal of the game, sending Palace fans wild at the final whistle.
It's an amazing day, supporting Palace for 46 years, and I don't know if I ever thought I'd see this, but it's genuinely the best day of my sporting life.
Brilliant. I waited 60 years for this, 60 years, and I never thought it would happen. Speechless, overwhelmed, fantastic.
And the Eurovision Song Contest is underway in the Swiss city of Basel. Finalists from 26 countries are performing at the St. Jakobshalle Arena. The bookmakers' favourite is the Swedish act Kai. Other frontrunners include Austria, France, the Netherlands and Finland. And that's the latest BBC News.
Hello and welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service, coming live from London. This is Owen Bennett-Jones, and we begin today with the dire situation in Gaza. The food blockade has been in place since March the 2nd. There are now consistent reports of desperate shortages and emaciation. And then today began with Israel launching an assault, the start, it seemed, of a major new offensive. And then there was more news from Hamas, which said that it was involved in indirect ceasefire talks with Israel in Doha. Well, let's begin our coverage with Firaz Al-Mazi. She and her family were living in a tent in Deir al-Balah. It was bombed overnight, killing a neighbour.
This is the 13th time we've been struck at the Aqsa tented camp. Where should we go if the Aqsa camp is not safe? We left our bombed-out houses and came here to the tented camp looking for safety.
Well, Dr. Victoria Rose is a British surgeon working at a hospital in southern Gaza.
I mean, the main thing that we're seeing is the malnutrition. People really are cachectic.
The children are really, really thin. We've got a lot of, youngsters whose teeth have fallen out. One of my colleagues' daughters, she's got a 2-year-old and her hair is thinning. They really are in the worst condition I've ever seen them. And that makes it so difficult for us because a lot of them have quite significant burn injuries. And with this level of malnutrition, they're so much more prone to infection and they've got so much less capacity to heal.
Meanwhile, speaking at the Arab League summit in Baghdad, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres addressed the risks that Gazans are now facing.